the Weekly Show with David J. Maloney. This week, David chats with iconic animator and director Gary Trousdale. And now, here's your host, David J. Maloney.
Welcome, everyone, to the Weekly Show. I'm your host, David J. Maloney. This week, we have director Gary Trousdale back with us again tonight, so don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. So, I mean, and there's so many powerful and slightly risque themes and moments. And I wonder if there was ever any discussion in the studio or pushback against any of it, you know, any decisions you guys made specifically. I mean, they could have easily went, hey, guys, we can't have a song called Hellfire, you know, that kind of thing. Was there anything that you guys wanted to do that they went, no, that's too much?
Well, okay, so when Paul and Gaetan originally boarded Hellfire, and you see Esmeralda dancing in the fire, right?
Yes.
This figure of her dancing.
A little kind of stripper-like a little bit.
What's that?
A little stripper-like, kind of, sort of.
She was nude in the drawings.
Yeah.
You know, and we attributed it to them being French. They said, yeah, they're French.
Yeah, that's it.
But, you know, we knew, and Roy Disney said, you're going to make sure that she's got clothes on. And so I sat with the head of effects. I worked with the effects team very closely. So I sat with the head of effects, and we went through every effects drawing, you know, of Esmeralda on fire, and made sure she was dressed, every single drawing. So, yeah, I mean, I wouldn't have minded if it had been, you know, more of this dark fantasy with, you know, like Paul and Gaetan had envisioned. But yeah, okay, we'll do this. And then when it got to the ratings board, because we thought, okay, so this got by Roy, and it got by Michael, and it got by Tom and Peter and us, and, you know, so we're all okay with it, and it's done, and it's gorgeous, but, you know, it'll knock your socks off. What is the ratings board going to say? And ultimately, they said they were only uncomfortable with the word sin, because when Frollo's got that scarf, and he says, "This burning desire is turning me to sin," and he sits down, and those red robed judges whoosh up, and they said, "Turning to sin, huh?" Well. And we said, well, we can't really re-record it because it's animated and in color and, you know, recorded and everything, but we can play with the sound levels. So we just upped to the sound effects of the whoosh of the judges, and we dropped the vocal performance of the word sin. So turning me to like that.
Yeah.
You can still kind of hear it, but it's ducked enough that it satisfied the rating boards, and they let it go through. And Tab Murphy, the writer, said, Hunchback of Notre Dame is the most R-rated G movie you'll ever see.
No, that makes sense. And Tony J in that song. Wow.
Yeah.
Were you in any of the recording sessions for these songs?
Yeah.
What about Hellfire? Were you in it for Hellfire too, or no?
Yes.
I had heard Tony took extra voice lessons in order to adjust his natural singing range to hit the final note in that song. Is that true?
I think he did. I think he might have. I mean, he didn't on the spot. That was like kind of on the outside, but he did hit those. Stephen and Alan, they put him through the ringer on that, but Tony delivered.
In my opinion, you, Kirk, Alan, Stephen, Tony, all of you guys created one of the best Disney villain songs of all time. I think it probably tops Be Prepared in my book. I'm kind of curious. When was the first time you started receiving music from Alan Menken and Stephen Schwartz for the film? And when you got it, what were your initial thoughts when you stopped and listened to it? Did you feel like it was like you had lightning in a bottle?
I mean, we had all worked with Alan before, so we knew how he worked, and we knew how good he was and how good he is. And not having worked with Stephen, but aware of his musical portfolio, of his pedigree. So we knew that he was going to be someone good. The studio had been searching for a worthy replacement for Howard for some time. In my opinion, they've never found it. You know, Howard is like one of those talents that comes along every 100 years or so. But Stephen was really, really damn good. And they had ideas for music when we were going through the storyboards and the script pages and all that. And there were places where we didn't think of for songs. He said, "I think I can help you here. I think we can, if we put a song here, this can maybe bridge this a little bit better than what you're doing with this scene." And great, let's do that. So they were in very early in the process. If not actually with the music in mind, they were spotting music, like where music could go. So we were aware of where their thoughts for music were. So like the opening number, Frollo chasing down Quasimodo's mother, and the front of the cathedral and the archdeacon, and we didn't. I mean, that wasn't necessarily a choral spot. It's not really a song, but I mean, as far as a musical moment, I think for our temp music, we were using the Requiem Mass from Mozart there and boarding it to that. And so Stephen said, "Okay, I see where you're going here." And then he did his, and he was very big on the Latin and liturgical aspect of the music to go with Notre Dame, and we were fine with that. So that's kind of how it went. Sometimes we would have a piece of temp music that would let Stephen springboard from. Sometimes he came to us and said, "I think this is a good place for music. I think it should be like this." And one of the most valuable lessons I learned early on in my career from Chuck Jones, of all people, was let your people do their job. Don't try and do it all for them, because they're probably better at it than you are. Let them do it, and they'll make you look good. So keeping an open mind to this kind of thing was pretty important to us.
So at that point, you and Kirk had two quite incredible animated feature films under your belt, both of which made the studio a lot of money and contributed to the golden age of 90s 2D animation. Did you guys have free reign to make whatever movie you wanted after that, or were you still at the mercy?
I mean, ultimately, I guess we did have free reign, or free-ish reign, but the thing with Disney is you work and you work and you work, and they'll yell at you and harangue you, and then you do good and you're king for a day or a week or whatever, and then when that wears off, you take the crown off, you put the dunce cap back on, and it's back to work. And
there's another king 2 weeks after that.
There's another king coming. Yeah, get off the throne. This guy's yeah. So, but after Hunchback, we were kind of sitting back and like taking it easy for a little bit because we could, and the studio was letting us. And it was Don Hahn that said, "Look, guys, if you want to keep this team together." And that was always a priority for us. And that was always one of the saddest parts about these films, is you get this great team together that, you've worked with and communicated with, and them and they know you, and then boom, they're gone. It just spread to the winds. But the opportunity to keep the team together, and also Don said, if you want to do something, if we want to do another movie, now is the time to figure out what we want to do, rather than have the studio tell us what they want us to do. So that led to the much storied meeting in a Mexican restaurant with Don, Kirk, Tab Murphy, and myself, and figuring out that we were going to do Atlantis.
And as you just mentioned, your next feature film went on to what I would argue is one of the best kept secrets of Disney animation, Atlantis: The Lost Empire. Where did the first idea for such a story come about?
Well, I mean, at this restaurant, we all kind of said, okay, we've done a couple musicals, we did okay, and Disney very much, was in this pattern of doing the Broadway musical formula, because they were doing. Well, we did Beauty, then there was Aladdin, then there was Hunchback, then there's Pocahontas, and it's like all of these. That was the formula. That was success, and Disney loves success, so they wanted to do that. And we said, not only are we getting a little weary of this formula, we think the audiences are going to get kind of tired of it as well. It's like, oh, it's another
Whoops.
Disney musical. It's like, okay, I guess we'll watch it. We'll take the kids and dump them off. But we wanted to do something else. We want to do something different, and preferably without songs. And
was that decided early on? Because I was going to ask you about that. Did you decide you were done with musicals for a while, or?
Yeah, we did. That came pretty early, and that was like the four of us. We said, yeah, honestly, all things considered, songs have been very good to us. Musicals have been very good to us, but the company's doing a lot of musicals, and I just don't know if we want to do another musical. It's going to be more of the same. Can we try something different and, like kind of wake people up again? And it was around that time that we said, maybe, those old Disney live action things from like the 50s and 60s, the Swiss Family Robinson and 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, and all those like really cool action adventure things from that time. What if we did an animated version of that? I mean, it's in the Disney canon. We can point and say, look, Walt Disney did it, and I believe it was either Kirk or Don that said we can use the analogy that when you go to Disneyland and you're walking down the main street, and right ahead is the castle, the Sleeping Beauty's castle, and you go straight through that, which is what we've been doing for the last 50 years, and you're into Fantasyland. But if we hung a left at the circle there, you're in Adventureland, and we want to go to Adventureland this time. And that's kind of what sold us with the executives, was that analogy. It's like, we're not straying away from Disney. We're just going to a different land in Disney. So, that's how we were able to kind of, that was our Jedi mind trick.
Now, even then, without it being a musical, without the score that James Newton Howard created for you guys for the film, I would think the movie would probably lose a lot of its magic and mystique.
Absolutely.
How important did you think the score was going to be for the film, and when did James Newton Howard come on board?
I mean, we always knew that music was important. I mean, me being like the least musical person on earth, even I know that music, the right music can elevate a scene amazingly well, just as bad music can ruin it. And I just saw recently it was a scene from Star Wars. I think it was like Darth Vader is like walking in to this area on his giant Imperial cruiser, and his generals are looking like kind of nervous and apprehensive, and they changed it from the Darth Vader music to like some kind of love story theme, and it totally changed it. It was like suddenly they're like anticipating something kind of nice here, and it was hilarious. But that's what music can do. It's like you get different music, and it can really change things. So we knew that music was going to be a huge part of this. And even our temp music, we were like really careful and really worked hard, with our music editors and our editors, like, let's get something in here that really helps this theme. And so when we got James in, it's like, okay, here's what we want to do. Unfortunately, he was, way better than us, and said, okay, I gotcha. Just let me do this.
Let him do his thing, and then
let him do his thing. And like, for instance, the Crystal Chamber music, it was like I think he mentioned to us, I kind of have this, slightly more tribal, but not quite tribal, a little bit mystical, but orchestral. And we're like, yeah, okay, whatever, go do it. And he came back with that music that is, arguably some of the best in the film.
How did you decide on the incredible art style for Atlantis? Because to me, it's one of the most beautiful 2D animated films made.
Well, we wanted something at that time. There was a lot of digital animation was starting to catch on, and it has that, that real rounded and airbrushed and photorealistic look to it that, honestly, when you look at it, from film to film to film to film, it all kind of looks the same, regardless of the graphic language. You get this, beautiful photorealistic lighting and shading, and it's like, okay, yeah, whatever. And we wanted to go opposite that. We wanted to make it look like an illustration, not even a painting, a painterly painting. Like when we did Beauty, Brian's assessment of that was, I want it to be like Bambi, but with interiors. And so there was a lot of that, that kind of French, the French Renaissance, the shading and the blocks of colors. And we said,
like a moving painting.
What's that?
Like a moving painting.
Right, exactly. But we wanted number one, for the character, we knew the characters were going to be flat. That's just the thing with 2D. But we said, if we can do that with the backgrounds as well, and we found some turn of the century painters that used gradations of color rather than blends of color. So it looked like almost like cut paper on top of each other to give it a flat look in the backgrounds, but still give it dimension and a beautiful palette. And then you could put your flat character on that, and the character worked with the background much better. And Kirk and I were both huge fans of Mike Mignola and Hellboy, and we said this would be so cool because we liked his graphic style, his boldness, his use of black, his design sense. We just, both of us were, really loved it. And so we contacted him, and evidently he was really surprised. He's like, "What? How'd you get my number?" But he, he came through and he had some really great story ideas as well. So, that was a big win for us.
Well, and I don't remember myself seeing anything exactly quite like it before. Was it kind of a new art style or drawing style at the time, or was it something that had been dabbled with but just never put on that scale?
But that particular style for Atlantis?
Yeah.
I think it was, the closest you could probably come was like the Ivan Earl inspired work in Sleeping Beauty. Just the big shapes and, kind of his color treatment. But this was a lot more flat, a lot more comic book and illustrative than painted. So, and we even had kind of classes for the animators, like how to draw Mike Mignola hands. Here's the hand, but the fingers are squared off, and the fingernails are more triangular or more blocky. They're not round with a little cuticle, and so it was a whole learning process for everybody to get that new style.
How did you guys decide on the opening 5 minutes of the film? Because to me, it's one of the more thrilling, dynamic, kind of otherworldly openings I've seen. It kind of feels like you went from 0 to 100 in a nanosecond and then back.
Right. Originally, and if you've seen the, I think the DVD with the extras, the added stuff, you can see the original opening, which was we had a Viking ship. Like growing up, and the captain of the ship had the shepherd's journal and was speaking in Icelandic, which we were told by our linguist was the closest, to in what we thought it would be, but like Norwegian.
Yeah.
And he said, now when the Vikings went and colonized Iceland, they pretty much stayed there, and that was the language that was spoken. The language the Vikings spoke went to Iceland and stayed that way basically until World War II, because nobody went there. And so the language didn't have all these other influences coming at it until World War II, when the U.S. set up a radar base there. So we had every Icelandic actor in Los Angeles, all three of them, doing these Viking voices. And they went home after the first night and were calling their grandparents, okay, how would you say this? And what's the phrase for that? So it was pretty authentic as far as old Icelandic / Viking. So these Vikings were out on the high sea with this shepherd's journal, and they get taken down by the Leviathan. The still guarding the portal, and it took them down. And we end with a floating book, and then we wipe to the Smithsonian. And that's entirely animated, entirely in color. It's done. We were like ready to cut it on. And John Sanford, who was our head of story, said, something's wrong here. It's just not connecting. We don't really care about the Vikings. We don't get to Atlantis till about a half an hour in, and we don't see any of the Atlanteans. This is their story too. This is their problem, and there's nothing to connect us. We need to. So that was his idea, to bring them into the beginning of the film, but we didn't really know how. I had an idea. It's like, okay, I think I know what to do. You're gonna love this. I went to a strip club and boarded the whole thing out on a napkin, and in that one night, and came back with it the next day, and we gave it, I think, to Todd Kurosawa, and he boarded it out beautifully, and that became the opening. Now, and we had said, let it be the last day. It's the last day of Atlantis, and what happens then.
Do you think the pendulum will ever swing back towards 2D animation? Is there like a piece of technology on the horizon that can make 2D more cost effective, so studios will start making tentpole 2D films again, or has that ship sailed? So
hard to tell. I mentioned earlier that after a while, a lot of the 3D digital stuff looks the same. And when I was at DreamWorks, they had a little conference day, like an off-campus conference where they had like directors, producers, executives, etc., and talking about how can we stand out from the crowd? How can we make things look different? And they had put together a little reel of like 30-second clips of all the animated features from like that year and the year before, and what was coming out. And I mean, this was a few years ago, but everything, like I said, it all looked the same.
Cookie cutter.
Graphic language was different. So you'd have something like Madagascar, and then you'd have something like Shrek, then you'd have something like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and so very different graphic styles. But again, it's like there's that lighting, there's that shading, there's that photorealism. It's like, yeah, it's just all blending together. And then what really popped was the Simpsons movie, and everybody went, doink, yeah, that, and that's what really stood out. And of course, they completely ignored the advice and went back to 3D shading. But yeah, it really popped out. It really stood apart from all the rest. And I gotta hope that someday they'll do that. When Ron and John did Princess and the Frog, I thought, okay, maybe maybe this will catch on, but I guess it is still kind of prohibitively expensive, and people still like that 2D or that 3D look. But then you see things like, like Arcane come out, and that's got a whole different look to it. Or Klaus, which is the 2D, 3D hybrid that was gorgeous. So I have hope.
Do you think it's even possible to have another movie like Atlantis or Hunchback made? I mean, I don't think Disney's killed anyone in an animated film in quite some time. Much less much less.
So we got some time to make up for.
Much less had a villain anywhere close to Claude Frollo.
I mean, sure, anything is possible. As they say, in an infinite universe, all things are possible. But honestly, at this point, I don't really see it, but I don't know.
Gary, thank you so much for joining us today.
Sure, it's my pleasure.
Ladies and gentlemen, Gary Trousdale. That's our show for tonight. Thank you so much for watching, and a special thanks to director Gary Trousdale for joining us once again. Stay safe, everyone.